The story of Hürrem Sultan, known also as Roxolana, begins in the rugged, war-torn lands of Eastern Europe. Long before she became the powerful and influential woman who would change the course of Ottoman history. Born Alexandra Lisowska around 1505 in the small village of Ruthenia, in present-day Ukraine, her early life was marked by the violence and upheaval of the region, a place where empires clashed and borders shifted as easily as the winds. A humble beginning. Alexandra's childhood was far from the grandeur of the royal palaces she would later inhabit. Ruthenia, during this period, was a battleground between the Ottoman Empire and various European powers. The village where she was born was ravaged by frequent raids, and like many others in the region, Alexandra's family lived under constant threat of attack. The Lisowska family, part of the noble class, had limited power but were nonetheless respected in their village. Her father, a minor noble, tried his best to protect his family from the dangers around them, but no one was safe from the slave raids that were common at the time. In the early 1510s, a group of Ottoman soldiers raided the village, part of their campaign to expand the empire's reach into Europe. During this raid, Alexandra was captured, along with several others, and sold into slavery. The road to the imperial palace. Like many other women who were captured during these raids, Alexandra was taken to the Ottoman Empire, where she would begin her journey from an innocent captive to one of the most powerful women in the empire's history. She was sold to the royal harem in Istanbul, the heart of the empire. The harem was a complex institution, a world of opulence and power, yet also a place fraught with intrigue and rivalry. Upon arriving in Istanbul, Alexandra was given the name Roxolana, which may have been derived from Rus, reflecting her Slavic heritage. The harem, with its multitude of women from various regions of the empire and beyond, was an intricate world of court politics, where favor could be won or lost in the blink of an eye. It was within this world that Roxolana would make her mark. Despite being one of the many slaves who initially served the Sultan and his concubines. The first encounter with Süleyman. Roxolana's beauty and intelligence quickly captured the attention of Süleyman the Magnificent, the young Sultan of the Ottoman Empire. Süleyman, at this time in his life, was still a relatively new ruler, having ascended to the throne in 1520 following the death of his father, Selim I. He was a man of exceptional talents, military prowess, a sharp mind for politics, and a passion for the arts and culture. But it was his interest in women that would lead to his meeting with Roxolana and ultimately, his greatest personal and political alliance. Süleyman was accustomed to the ways of the harem where women competed for his affection, each trying to secure their place in his life. However, what set Roxolana apart from the other women was not just her physical beauty, which was undoubtedly striking, but also her charm, intellect, and wit. She was a woman of substance in a world where women were often valued only for their looks and their ability to bear children. At first, Roxolana was just another face in the harem, another woman vying for Süleyman's attention. However, it wasn't long before she began to stand out, earning the Sultan's favor through her cleverness and insight into the world around her. Roxolana was not just a passive participant in the harem's politics. She was an active player, observing, learning, and forming alliances that would serve her well in the years to come. The shift from slave to concubine. As Süleyman became more captivated by Roxolana, he began to spend more time with her, something highly unusual for a sultan. In the Ottoman court, the sultan's harem was often a complex arrangement of concubines, and for a woman to rise from the status of a slave to one of the sultan's favored concubines was rare. However, Roxolana's unique qualities began to set her apart from the others. Süleyman, who had already fathered several children with other women, found in Roxolana something different. Her intelligence, sharp mind, and ambition matched his own. She was no longer just a concubine to him, she became his confidant and trusted advisor, someone whose opinions and counsel he valued. This development was a remarkable turn of events, as it was incredibly rare for a concubine to hold such a position of trust in the Sultan's inner circle. For Roxolana, the transformation from a mere slave girl into one of the Sultan's most trusted confidants was not just a personal triumph. It was also the beginning of her rise to unparalleled power within the harem and the Ottoman Empire itself. This marked the start of her gradual, but steady, ascent through the ranks of the court, as she used her wit, beauty, and intelligence to her advantage. The unique relationship with Süleyman. Süleyman's affection for Roxolana quickly deepened, a bond that was more than just physical attraction. He began to rely on her for advice, trusting her judgment in matters of state, and even confiding in her about his military and political strategies. In turn, Roxolana displayed a sharp political mind that impressed Süleyman. She was not only able to advise him on matters of the court but also showed an uncanny ability to understand the broader political landscape, giving her the tools to help shape the future of the Ottoman Empire. As Süleyman's affection for Roxolana grew, so did her influence in the palace. Their bond was more than a mere romantic relationship. It was a partnership that transcended the boundaries of the harem. Roxolana, who had once been a powerless slave, was now a woman who was deeply embedded in the inner workings of the Ottoman Empire. Her rise was a testament to her abilities, her perseverance, and her strategic brilliance. The break from tradition. What made Roxolana's story even more remarkable was Süleyman's decision to break with tradition and marry her. In the Ottoman Empire, sultans typically had multiple concubines, and it was rare for a sultan to marry one of his harem women. Concubines were typically not seen as equals to the wives of the sultan, who were often of noble birth. However, Süleyman's bond with Roxolana was different. He saw in her not just a lover but a true partner. This decision was momentous, not just for their personal lives, but also for the Ottoman Empire. It marked a departure from centuries of tradition, where a sultan's harem was a political tool rather than a source of personal affection. Süleyman's decision to marry Roxolana signaled a shift in the balance of power within the Ottoman court, where the influence of women, particularly those within the harem, would soon be more significant than ever before. As Roxolana settled into her new role as Süleyman's wife, she became a powerful figure within the Ottoman Empire. Her rise from humble beginnings to the position of Süleyman's legal wife was extraordinary, a journey that would lay the groundwork for her enduring influence over the course of the Sultan's reign. The first steps toward love and power. As Roxolana's position within the Ottoman court solidified, her relationship with Süleyman evolved beyond that of a mere consort and confidant. What began as a romantic affair grew into a powerful partnership that would reshape the course of history. Süleyman's love for her was deep and sincere, but it was also an alliance of minds and ambitions. Süleyman, already an ambitious and skilled ruler, saw in Roxolana someone who could complement his reign, not just in the palace, but across the empire. Though Süleyman had other wives and concubines, his deep connection with Roxolana became evident to all who served him. She was not just another concubine to add to his collection of women, she was the woman who held his heart. This connection between them was unlike any other. Süleyman began to spend more and more time with Roxolana, and their interactions became less about love and more about shared governance. Roxolana, in turn, displayed a natural understanding of the complexities of empire and the intricacies of court politics. She was more than just a partner in love, she was a partner in governance. As the Sultan's closest ally, Roxolana began to play an influential role behind the scenes. She understood the delicate balance of power in the empire, and her ability to navigate the often treacherous waters of the palace made her a formidable figure. Though the Sultan's court was filled with ambitious figures, none had the same hold over him that Roxolana did. It was clear that she was not only a beloved companion but also a critical part of his decision-making process. But this growing power came at a price. The other women in the harem, once rivals for Süleyman's attention, now saw Roxolana as a direct threat. As her influence grew, so did the animosity of those around her. But she was undeterred, her strategic mind and charm making her an essential figure in the Sultan's life. She knew that, in this world of power struggles, her ability to stay close to Süleyman was her greatest asset. Hürrem's early political maneuvering. By the mid-1520s, Roxolana had already established herself as an influential presence in Süleyman's court. Her ability to manage the political dynamics within the palace and her relationship with Süleyman gave her a unique position to influence the direction of the Ottoman Empire. She understood the necessity of alliances, not only within the palace but also beyond it, in the larger political landscape of the empire. Her intellect and diplomatic skills soon became apparent as she navigated her way through the world of powerful courtiers, military leaders, and foreign diplomats. Roxolana's influence was not confined to the Sultan alone. She was keenly aware of the empire's politics, and through Süleyman she had the opportunity to impact decisions on the empire's expansion, its military strategies, and its diplomatic relations. The Ottoman Empire under Süleyman was reaching the height of its power, as the empire expanded its territories and its military conquests. Roxolana was instrumental in shaping how the Sultan approached these challenges. One of her early successes was her involvement in securing Süleyman's position in the power dynamics of the court. Although Süleyman was a capable and respected ruler, the political landscape of the Ottoman Empire was volatile, with factions constantly vying for control. The fact that Roxolana had such a strong hold on Süleyman's affections allowed her to consolidate power for her family and her own ambitions. But Roxolana was not only a player in the palace. She was also a master of foreign diplomacy. She understood that in order to protect the Ottoman Empire and its interests, Süleyman needed strong alliances with foreign powers. Through her diplomatic skills, she helped Süleyman navigate complex relationships with powerful European kingdoms. She is said to have written letters to influential figures, including the Venetian Republic, giving her a direct hand in shaping the empire's external relations. The birth of a dynasty. The most significant turning point in Roxolana's life came with the birth of her children. She bore Süleyman several children, but it was her sons who would become central to the future of the Ottoman Empire. The birth of her sons marked a new chapter in her political life, one where she would actively work to secure the throne for her children. As a mother, Roxolana was deeply invested in the future of her family and the empire. Her greatest ambition was to see her son Selim II ascend to the throne. This would be no easy task, as there were many rivals for the sultanate. Süleyman's other sons, especially Mustafa, had long been seen as strong contenders for the throne. Mustafa was a popular figure among the military and the people, and his potential to become sultan posed a serious threat to Roxolana's aspirations. But she knew that securing her son's future would require careful maneuvering within the court. Roxolana began to use her influence over Süleyman to sway his decision-making regarding the succession. She played a key role in ensuring that Selim would be in the best possible position to claim the throne when the time came. In the dangerous political landscape of the Ottoman Empire, securing the throne for one's children was no simple task. It often involved deadly rivalries and even executions. But Roxolana was willing to go to any lengths to see her son succeed. In one of the most dramatic moments of her life, she is said to have orchestrated the execution of Mustafa, Süleyman's son from another concubine. While the details of this event remain somewhat murky, it is widely believed that Roxolana played a crucial role in Mustafa's downfall. The execution of Mustafa, ordered by Süleyman, was a turning point in the history of the empire. It not only secured Selim's path to the throne, but also solidified Roxolana's status as one of the most powerful figures in the empire. Roxolana's actions, while controversial, were a testament to her political acumen and ambition. She was willing to do whatever it took to ensure the future of her family, even if it meant sacrificing the lives of others. This marked the beginning of her legacy as a woman who shaped the course of Ottoman history, not only through her relationship with Süleyman but also through her determination to establish her own dynasty. The Sultan's legal wife. Roxolana's journey from a captured slave to the Sultan's legal wife was a remarkable transformation. It was an unprecedented move for Süleyman to marry one of his concubines, especially one who had come from such humble origins. In the world of the Ottoman court, where tradition held that the Sultan could have as many concubines as he wished, marriage to a concubine was not common practice. However, Süleyman's deep love for Roxolana, coupled with her political influence, led him to make a decision that would forever change the course of the empire. In the early 1530s, Süleyman took the extraordinary step of marrying Roxolana, making her the Haseki Sultan, the legal queen of the Ottoman Empire. This was a remarkable departure from tradition, and it was a decision that would forever alter the way future sultans governed and interacted with their wives and concubines. The marriage between Süleyman and Roxolana signified not only their personal bond but also a shift in the political dynamics of the Ottoman court. Roxolana was no longer just a concubine or a mere consort. She was the legal wife of the Sultan, and her position as the Haseki Sultan gave her unparalleled influence within the empire. From this point forward, she would become not only Süleyman's partner in love but also his partner in governance. With her marriage to Süleyman the Magnificent officially recognized, Hürrem Sultan, Roxolana, had achieved what no concubine before her had. Her transformation from a mere slave to the Sultan's Haseki Sultan, his legal wife, marked the beginning of a new era in the history of the Ottoman Empire. The reverberations of this shift in power were felt not only in the Ottoman court but also across the entire empire and beyond. Establishing power in the harem. When Hürrem became Süleyman's wife, she did not just enter the realm of royal consorts, she dominated it. The harem, once a place where power was dictated by birthright, began to shift in its dynamics. Traditionally, sultans would have multiple wives and a harem filled with concubines, many of whom came from noble or slave backgrounds. Their primary role was to produce heirs, but beyond that, their influence in the court was often minimal. The harem's hierarchy was rigid, with powerful families sometimes using their daughters in the harem to ensure political alliances. Hürrem, however, broke the mold. She was no longer just another consort in the Sultan's collection of women. She was the queen, the one who held Süleyman's heart. This was a role that no other woman had held before her. Her influence over Süleyman grew rapidly not only because of her beauty or charm but because of her intellect, her political savvy, and her unrelenting ambition. As the years passed, her position at court strengthened, and she started to gain significant influence over the Sultan's decision-making. She didn't simply exist within the harem, she took command of it. Women in the harem now looked to her as their leader. She was not just a wife, she was a political force, whose influence reached far beyond the palace walls. Süleyman, for his part, was not one to shy away from new ideas or changing the norms of his empire. He trusted Hürrem, and their partnership became a strong political and emotional bond. Unlike the typical roles women in the harem played, Hürrem was expected to handle delicate political matters, strategize about the empire's future, and make important decisions that affected the empire's governance. The rise of Roxolana's political influence. As Hürrem's power grew, so did her ability to influence matters of state. She had become an indispensable partner to Süleyman, helping to shape policies that impacted not just the Ottoman court but the entire empire. Unlike her predecessors, she was not only part of the Sultan's inner circle but also his trusted advisor, a confidant whose counsel he valued highly. This was not a position for women in the Ottoman Empire, but Hürrem had broken this norm with grace and determination. One of her greatest achievements came in her ability to manage the delicate balance of power between the different factions within the Ottoman Empire. At the time, the empire was vast, stretching from the Middle East to the edges of Europe, and it required a complex web of alliances and negotiations to keep it together. Hürrem, ever the master of diplomacy, helped Süleyman navigate through this web with a mix of strategic alliances, calculated risks, and personal relationships. Her influence also extended beyond the borders of the empire. As Süleyman sought to expand the Ottoman Empire into Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa, Hürrem took part in advising him on foreign relations. She understood that the empire's military campaigns were not only about conquest but also about securing allies and forming strategic relationships with other powerful nations. Her correspondence with European diplomats, especially with the Venetian Republic, marked the start of a more nuanced diplomatic approach in Ottoman foreign policy. Shifting the balance of power, the struggle for succession. While Hürrem became the most influential woman in the Sultan's life, her role was not without challenges. One of the greatest struggles she faced came from within the palace walls: competition for the throne. The Ottoman succession system was based on a relatively fluid concept, where multiple sons of the Sultan could vie for the throne, with the strongest or most favored son often taking the crown. However, Hürrem's ambitions were not only personal. They were for the future of her children and the stability of the empire. She knew that to secure her place in Ottoman history, she had to secure the throne for her son, Selim II. Despite the fierce competition from Mustafa, Süleyman's eldest son from another consort, Mustafa was not only the firstborn son, but he also had a strong following in the military and was seen as a capable leader. His popularity made him a direct threat to Selim II's ascension to the throne. In the political landscape of the Ottoman Empire, where family rivalries were often settled with deadly consequences, Hürrem's strategy to secure her son's future involved a great deal of political maneuvering and ruthlessness. It is widely believed that she used her influence over Süleyman to convince him that Mustafa posed a threat to the empire's stability. According to historical accounts, Süleyman, who was deeply influenced by Hürrem, ordered the execution of Mustafa, a decision that would have profound consequences for the royal family and the future of the empire. Mustafa's death, under controversial circumstances, marked a pivotal moment in the history of the Ottoman Empire. It not only ensured Selim II's place as the next sultan, but also solidified Hürrem Sultan's position as the most powerful woman in the empire. While some saw her actions as cold and politically motivated, others viewed her as a mother who was simply protecting her family's future. The execution of Mustafa would ultimately lead to a shift in the balance of power within the Ottoman court, with Selim II emerging as the heir to the throne. The power of motherhood. Beyond politics, Hürrem's role as a mother was a critical aspect of her power. She did not only secure Süleyman's love, she ensured the future of her family within the empire. The birth of Selim II and later her other children cemented her role as the central figure in Süleyman's life. Unlike many other women in the harem, Hürrem took an active role in the upbringing of her children. She was not just a mother in the traditional sense, she was a strategic planner, ensuring that her children would have the best possible chance at ruling. Hürrem was an astute observer of the politics of the harem and the larger empire. She understood that in order to maintain her family's power, she had to carefully control the paths of her children. With Mustafa out of the picture, Selim II became the next logical heir. However, the transition was not smooth, and the rivalry between her son and other potential heirs created a tense atmosphere within the palace. Hürrem continued to guide and influence Süleyman, pushing him to make decisions that would favor her family's rise to power. While Süleyman was a revered sultan deeply respected for his military campaigns and his role in expanding the empire, Hürrem became the heart of the Ottoman court. Her strength and political savvy were unmatched, and the power she wielded both behind closed doors and in the court's public life set her apart from the traditional roles women played in Ottoman society. She was not just the sultan's wife. She was the driving force behind many of his key decisions, ensuring that her children, her legacy, and her empire's future were secure. By the time Hürrem Sultan secured her position as Süleyman the Magnificent's legal wife, she had already become a political player of significant power within the court. However, her rise was not solely because of her relationship with Süleyman, it was also her acute political acumen, understanding of diplomacy, and strategic thinking that allowed her to become an influential force within the Ottoman Empire. The court, once a world of shifting allegiances and intrigue, was now deeply influenced by Hürrem. She had evolved from a simple slave girl to a central political figure who could sway the decisions of the Sultan himself. Her transformation is one of the most extraordinary in history, establishing political dominance. After her marriage to Süleyman, Hürrem was no longer just a member of the harem, but a true partner in the empire's governance. Süleyman, who was known for his intellectual curiosity and openness to new ideas, recognized in Hürrem not only a trusted wife but also a brilliant strategist. She became one of his closest confidants, offering advice not only in matters of the heart but in the political and military decisions that would shape the future of the Ottoman Empire. Their partnership was unique in that it was deeply rooted in both love and shared governance. While Süleyman maintained his role as the Sultan, the empire increasingly operated through the lens of Hürrem Sultan's influence. This transformation was not without its challenges. The Ottoman court, with its vast network of powerful men and ambitious officials, was rife with rivalries, and many of these figures resented the rise of a woman to such a high place in the empire's politics. But Hürrem was no ordinary woman. She understood the power dynamics at play and knew how to use her position effectively to influence decisions that would benefit her and her family. One of her most significant contributions was in matters of diplomacy. At a time when the Ottoman Empire was involved in expansive military campaigns, including the siege of Vienna and the conquest of Hungary, Hürrem began to shape foreign relations through her diplomatic correspondence. Her ability to communicate with European powers, including the Venetian Republic, solidified her status as a key political figure in the empire. Süleyman trusted her advice on diplomatic matters, and it is believed that Hürrem played a significant role in securing Ottoman interests in Europe and the Middle East. Hürrem's patronage of the arts and religion. Beyond her political influence, Hürrem also began to reshape the cultural landscape of the empire. While Süleyman was already a patron of the arts, encouraging the growth of Ottoman architecture, literature, and calligraphy, Hürrem's influence as a patron of the arts became a central feature of her reign as the Sultan's consort. Her support for the Islamic arts and religious institutions helped to establish a lasting legacy of Ottoman culture that would endure for centuries. One of her most significant contributions was in the field of charity. Hürrem funded the construction of mosques, schools, and hospitals, leaving an indelible mark on the empire's charitable infrastructure. Among her most famous contributions is the Haseki Sultan Mosque in Istanbul, which remains a testament to her devotion to both her faith and her people. By establishing religious and charitable institutions, Hürrem not only demonstrated her wealth and power but also her commitment to the welfare of the empire's citizens, particularly the less fortunate. Her influence in religious matters was also profound. As the Sultan's wife, Hürrem became a key figure in the administration of Islamic law and the daily practices of the court. Her understanding of both Sharia law and the intricate workings of the Ottoman bureaucratic system enabled her to advise Süleyman on matters of governance that were grounded in Islamic tradition. While many in the empire considered women in the harem to be politically irrelevant, Hürrem defied these expectations, shaping both the religious and secular policies of the Ottoman Empire. The role of women in the Ottoman Empire, a shift in the harem's dynamics. Hürrem's rise marked a significant shift in the power dynamics within the Ottoman harem, a world traditionally dominated by women who were seen as passive figures, concubines meant to bear children and entertain the Sultan. However, Hürrem transformed the harem into a more politically active space, where the Sultan's wives and concubines took on a more significant role in the governance of the empire. Under Hürrem's influence, women in the harem were not just passive participants. They began to play an active role in the political and diplomatic affairs of the empire. Hürrem established her own network of support among the women of the harem, and the Sultan's attention and affection, once divided among numerous concubines, were now increasingly focused on her and her children. The harem thus became a key center of power in the court, where family alliances, political strategies, and military plans were discussed and sometimes even implemented. Hürrem's rise was also mirrored by the rise of her sons, particularly Selim II. Her ability to manage her children's future, and her tactical political moves to position Selim as the next sultan, had ramifications for the empire's future stability. In the dangerous world of Ottoman succession, where fratricide and political intrigue were commonplace, Hürrem had to balance the desires of her own family with the interests of the empire. She did so with great skill, using the system of succession to her advantage, shifting alliances and managing rivalries. By now, Hürrem Sultan had not only become Süleyman's most trusted advisor but also one of the most influential women in the entire empire. Her power, however, came with challenges. Rivalries, both within the palace and in the broader political world of the empire, were inevitable. Hürrem had to constantly navigate through the politics of the court, where powerful figures vied for power and influence. Her greatest rival came from within her own family, the Sultan's other wives and their children. Though Mustafa, Süleyman's eldest son from another concubine, was the most prominent contender for the throne, Hürrem Selim II had the advantage of her careful political maneuvering and Süleyman's growing affection for her. To ensure that her son's future was secure, Hürrem engaged in a series of political intrigues, using her influence over the Sultan to steer his decisions in favor of Selim II. Her rivalry with Mustafa's supporters escalated, and in a tragic twist, Mustafa was executed by Süleyman's orders in 1553. This event, while controversial, ensured that Selim II was the next in line to inherit the throne. Hürrem's involvement in Mustafa's downfall remains one of the most debated aspects of her legacy, but it cemented her position as the most powerful woman in the empire. It also marked a turning point in the history of the Ottoman Empire, as the balance of power shifted in favor of the Sultan's immediate family rather than extended family members or external political factions. The strength of the Haseki Sultan. Hürrem Sultan's rise to political power was unprecedented in the history of the Ottoman Empire. Not only did she transform the role of women within the harem, but she also became a political force in her own right. Her ability to influence Süleyman's decisions on matters of state and succession changed the course of Ottoman history, making her a central figure in both the palace and the empire at large. Her legacy, built on both love and politics, continues to reverberate through the history of the Ottoman Empire, influencing not only how future sultans would govern but also how the empire's women would engage in political and public life. The relationship between Süleyman the Magnificent and Hürrem Sultan was one of the most remarkable love stories in history. It transcended the traditional norms of the Ottoman Empire, where relationships were often rooted in power dynamics, political alliances, and dynastic ambitions. Their story, however, was not only about love but about shared dreams, governance, and the building of an empire that would influence the world for centuries to come. A bond beyond the harem. The very nature of Süleyman and Hürrem's relationship was groundbreaking. In the context of the Ottoman court, the Sultan typically had multiple wives and a significant number of concubines, each of whom had a designated role. The women of the harem were not just part of the Sultan's private life but were also seen as tools for political alliances. However, Hürrem broke this mold. She was not just another beautiful woman in the Sultan's court. She became his trusted advisor, his confidant, and his partner in every sense. Their love, which began as an affair, grew into a partnership that shaped the future of the Ottoman Empire. Süleyman, a man deeply devoted to his empire and its expansion, this emotional and political partnership was rare in the history of the Ottoman sultans, where relationships between the sultan and his consorts were often defined by duty, not affection. While Süleyman was away leading his military campaigns, Hürrem managed the palace affairs and advised him on political matters. Her influence extended beyond the walls of the harem. Her wisdom and strategic thinking made her a trusted partner in his decisions, whether they involved military conquests, diplomacy, or internal court politics. Süleyman, known for his intellectual curiosity, found Hürrem's counsel invaluable, and he often sought her advice on the most critical matters of state. The break with tradition. Hürrem Sultan's marriage to Süleyman. Perhaps the most profound aspect of Süleyman and Hürrem's relationship was the Sultan's decision to marry her. This was a radical departure from Ottoman tradition. Typically, a sultan's wives were often of noble birth, and the harem was a place for concubines rather than wives. The status of a concubine was somewhat fixed, and a sultan usually took one or more legal wives who were of equal status, but none of these wives were typically women from the harem. However, Süleyman broke with this centuries-old tradition and elevated Hürrem to a position previously reserved for noblewomen outside the harem. In the early 1530s, Süleyman made Hürrem his legal wife and Hasiki Sultan, the chief wife of the Sultan, a title that gave her not only a privileged position in the court but also the political influence that came with it. This decision was not just a personal one but had significant political ramifications. By marrying Hürrem, Süleyman sent a clear message: love could transcend tradition, and it could even reshape the power dynamics of the empire. Their union signaled a shift in the Ottoman court and reflected the growing importance of emotional bonds in political relationships, an idea that would have profound effects on future Ottoman rulers and the structure of the harem. A shared vision, building the empire together. As Süleyman and Hürrem grew closer, their shared vision for the empire became clearer. Süleyman, often referred to as the lawgiver, was committed to reforming the Ottoman legal system, expanding the empire's borders, and enhancing its cultural and intellectual prestige. Hürrem, who had risen from the status of a slave to the Sultan's chief consort, now had the power to influence every aspect of his reign. Their collaboration extended into the realms of military strategy, lawmaking, diplomacy, and cultural patronage. Their partnership also extended to the spiritual and religious aspects of the empire. Hürrem shared Süleyman's vision of creating a unified empire that was not just a political and military force, but also a cultural and intellectual powerhouse. The Ottoman Empire was not only expanding geographically but also experiencing a renaissance in arts and architecture, much of which was made possible by Hürrem's patronage. She funded the construction of mosques, schools, and hospitals, including the magnificent Hasiki Sultan Mosque in Istanbul, which still stands as a testament to her influence. Their marriage was not just about personal affection, it was about creating a legacy that would endure for generations. Together, Süleyman and Hürrem established a model of governance where love, politics, and statecraft coexisted in a delicate but powerful balance. The tragic and triumphant love story. While their relationship was marked by mutual respect and affection, it was not without its challenges. The question of succession remained a constant source of tension. The rivalry between Hürrem's children and those of Süleyman's other consorts, particularly Mustafa, the Sultan's eldest son, created an atmosphere of intrigue and danger within the palace. Hürrem's desire to see her son Selim II ascend to the throne led to a series of complex political maneuvers, including the eventual execution of Mustafa, a tragedy that would have long-lasting effects on the royal family. Despite the personal and political challenges they faced, the bond between Süleyman and Hürrem remained strong. Their love was a driving force behind many of Süleyman's greatest achievements, and it ensured that Hürrem's legacy would live on for centuries to come. The love story of Süleyman and Hürrem is remembered not only for its intensity and the challenges it overcame but also for the ways it transformed the Ottoman Empire. Hürrem was no longer just a concubine or a wife. She had become a true partner in building the empire's future. The changing role of women in the harem. Their union also had a lasting impact on the role of women within the Ottoman court. The traditional structure of the harem, where women were expected to be submissive and largely passive, began to shift under Hürrem Sultan's influence. No longer were the women in the harem merely pawns in the political game. They had the opportunity to play active roles in shaping the empire. Hürrem's ascent to the position of Sultan's wife and her continued involvement in political matters meant that future sultans would have to navigate the complex political relationships between women within the harem. In many ways, Hürrem became the model for future consorts who would wield power, influence, and authority within the Ottoman Empire. A legacy of love and power. Ultimately, the love story between Süleyman and Hürrem was not just about their personal feelings for one another, but about their shared commitment to shaping the future of the Ottoman Empire. Together, they left an indelible mark on history. Hürrem's transformation from a captured slave to the Sultan's legal wife and trusted advisor was a journey that defied the expectations of her time. Their relationship was a testament to the power of partnership, one that blended love, politics, and strategy to shape the destiny of a vast empire. Through Süleyman and Hürrem, the Ottoman court became a place where affection could translate into power, and love could become a force that not only changed lives but also empires. As Hürrem Sultan solidified her position as Süleyman the Magnificent's wife, her influence within the Ottoman Empire began to expand beyond the walls of the harem. No longer just a consort, she was now the Sultan's most trusted advisor, the woman who played a central role not only in the palace but also in the governance of the empire. Her rise to power was unprecedented for a woman in the Ottoman court, and it signified the growing role of women in the politics of the empire. The rise of Hürrem's political influence. By the mid-1530s, Hürrem Sultan was no longer simply the Sultan's wife, but an active political player in the Ottoman Empire. Süleyman the Magnificent, known for his intellectual depth and progressive outlook, began to rely heavily on her judgment and counsel. What began as a passionate love affair had evolved into a political partnership, one that had implications for the entire empire. Hürrem's influence was especially significant in Ottoman domestic politics, where she played a key role in shaping the succession crisis that would ultimately lead to her son Selim II's ascension to the throne. But her impact stretched far beyond the royal family. Her role in managing the harem, her involvement in political alliances, and her strategic approach to governance all contributed to the transformation of the Ottoman Empire during Süleyman's reign. Despite the complex power dynamics within the empire, Hürrem navigated the political terrain with remarkable skill, using her influence not just to ensure her own survival but also to secure her family's future. As she gained the trust of Süleyman, she became a voice of reason in the Sultan's ear, offering counsel on everything from military strategy to foreign diplomacy. Süleyman, though a brilliant ruler in his own right, understood that his success depended on the collaboration between him and Hürrem, whose mind was as sharp as his own. Hürrem's role in diplomacy. One of Hürrem Sultan's most significant contributions to the empire was her involvement in diplomacy. As the wife of Süleyman, she became a key figure in negotiating with foreign powers and ensuring the empire's interests were represented on the international stage. Her political acumen and her ability to understand complex international relations were invaluable to Süleyman, particularly as the empire expanded its reach across Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa. Her influence in diplomacy was particularly evident in her interactions with the Venetian Republic, one of the Ottoman Empire's most important European allies. Hürrem Sultan's letters to the Venetians and other European powers helped to maintain Ottoman ties with these countries, ensuring that the empire remained a powerful force on the world stage. Through her correspondence and negotiations, Hürrem also laid the foundation for many of the alliances that would prove crucial for the Ottoman Empire in the years to come. In addition to diplomatic matters, Hürrem was involved in military decisions that would directly affect the empire's territorial expansion. While Süleyman commanded his armies on the battlefield, Hürrem understood the importance of maintaining control over the empire's borders and protecting its interests. She was not afraid to give Süleyman her opinions on military matters, and her insights into political strategy often shaped the decisions made in the royal court. The politics of succession and the legacy of Hürrem Sultan. While Hürrem Sultan's influence was felt throughout the empire, her most significant political accomplishment was the securing of the throne for her son Selim II. The Ottoman succession system, though not strictly hereditary, was fraught with competition, intrigue, and deadly rivalries. The most immediate challenge to Selim II's ascension came from Mustafa, the Sultan's eldest son by another consort, Mahidevran Sultan. Mustafa, once seen as the heir to the throne, was a popular figure, particularly among the military elite. He had earned the loyalty of many of the empire's soldiers, who saw him as a capable and charismatic leader. However, Hürrem Sultan and her supporters saw Mustafa as a threat to Selim II's path to the throne. For Hürrem, securing Selim's future meant removing Mustafa from the equation, a decision that would ultimately have tragic consequences. In 1553, after a period of growing tensions, Süleyman the Magnificent ordered the execution of Mustafa, a move that shocked the empire and remains one of the most controversial actions of his reign. While many historians believe Hürrem Sultan played a pivotal role in orchestrating Mustafa's downfall, her supporters argue that she acted out of a mother's desire to secure her son's future and protect the dynasty. The execution of Mustafa ensured that Selim II would be the next sultan, but it also created deep divisions within the royal family. The decision to execute Mustafa was one of the most pivotal moments in Hürrem Sultan's life and reign. It marked the culmination of her political maneuvering and her desire to see her son become Süleyman's successor. However, the consequences of Mustafa's death were far-reaching, both personally and politically. It altered the course of the Ottoman Empire and deepened the rivalries within the royal family. The establishment of the Haseki Sultan's legacy. As Hürrem Sultan's political influence grew, so did her legacy. She was not just a powerful woman in the harem. She became a figurehead for women in the Ottoman court, setting a precedent for future consorts who would wield political power. Hürrem was a patron of the arts, commissioning works of architecture, literature, and scholarship that enriched the cultural life of the empire. Her patronage extended to the building of mosques, schools, and hospitals, with the most famous of these being the Haseki Sultan Mosque, which she commissioned in Istanbul. Her involvement in charitable works and religious affairs was also significant. By funding institutions that benefited the public, Hürrem Sultan established a lasting legacy that went beyond political power. She was not simply a figure of luxury and indulgence. She used her wealth and influence to improve the lives of ordinary people, particularly through the establishment of hospitals, orphanages, and schools. Hürrem became synonymous with philanthropy in the Ottoman Empire, and her contributions to the development of the empire's infrastructure helped to solidify her reputation as one of the most important women in Ottoman history. The changing role of women in the Ottoman Empire. Hürrem Sultan's rise to power marked a profound shift in the role of women within the Ottoman Empire. Before Hürrem, the women of the harem had little political influence. The harem was traditionally a space for bearing children and entertaining the sultan. However, Hürrem changed that dynamic. She was not just a passive figure in the sultan's life. She was an active participant in the governance of the empire, setting a precedent for future consorts and women in the harem who would follow in her footsteps. Her influence extended to the next generation, as she was able to secure the throne for her son Selim II. In doing so, she not only altered the course of Ottoman history but also ensured that women in the harem could no longer be overlooked as mere passive figures. Hürrem Sultan became an example of the power that could be wielded by a woman who was intelligent, politically astute, and unafraid to use her position to shape the future of her empire. The unseen power behind the throne. As Süleyman the Magnificent continued his reign, Hürrem Sultan remained the unseen hand behind the throne. She was the Sultan's woman, the one who shaped the decisions of the empire, guided the Sultan through difficult political waters, and ensured that the future of the Ottoman dynasty was secure. Though her actions were often hidden from the public eye, her influence over Süleyman and the empire was undeniable. In a world where women had few avenues for power, Hürrem Sultan rose to become one of the most powerful figures in the Ottoman Empire, shaping both the political landscape and the cultural life of the empire. Her legacy continues to inspire and fascinate as she remains one of the most remarkable women in history. As Hürrem Sultan's political influence continued to grow within the court of Süleyman the Magnificent, the primary concern that dominated her mind was securing the future of her family and, more importantly, the succession of her son, Selim II, to the throne. The nature of Ottoman succession was fluid and the struggle for power within the royal family was fierce. As Süleyman grew older and the question of his heir loomed large, Hürrem knew that the stakes were higher than ever. The politics of succession in the Ottoman Empire. In the Ottoman Empire, succession was not determined by a clear hereditary system but rather by a complex combination of factors including military prowess, the ability to garner support from influential court officials, and, of course, the favor of the reigning sultan. Although Süleyman had many sons, the battle for the throne was far from straightforward. Historically, the empire had seen fratricide, the execution of brothers as a means of securing the throne, and Süleyman was no exception. His reign was marked by the tense competition between his sons, all of whom sought to take the throne after him. Among Süleyman's sons, Selim II, the child of Hürrem Sultan, was perhaps the least likely to inherit the throne. Selim had never been as popular as his older brother Mustafa, who was beloved by the military and the common people for his leadership abilities. But Hürrem Sultan was determined to ensure that Selim II would ascend to the throne. Despite Mustafa's popularity, Hürrem had already been plotting her strategy to secure Selim's future. In the ruthless world of Ottoman politics, where alliances were fragile and family loyalties were often tested, Hürrem knew that Mustafa's rise to power would threaten her son's prospects. And so, Hürrem began to work behind the scenes, using her considerable influence over Süleyman to eliminate Mustafa as a threat. The execution of Mustafa. The execution of Mustafa remains one of the most tragic and controversial events in Süleyman the Magnificent's reign. Mustafa, the eldest son of Süleyman, had long been considered the heir apparent. He had strong military support and his charisma had earned him the respect of both the Ottoman army and the people. Yet, despite this, Hürrem Sultan, driven by her desire to see Selim II ascend to the throne, worked to undermine his position. As tensions within the court intensified, Süleyman, under pressure from his advisors, and possibly swayed by Hürrem, ordered the execution of his son Mustafa in 1553. He was executed under the pretext that he was plotting against his father. Although many historians believe the decision was politically motivated to clear the path for Selim II's ascension, Mustafa was executed in a cruel and dramatic fashion, and his death shocked the empire, creating deep divisions within the royal family and the court. For Hürrem Sultan, Mustafa's execution was a crucial moment. It ensured that Selim II was no longer in direct competition for the throne. The death of Mustafa, however, came at a great cost. It left a legacy of tragedy and sorrow within the family and solidified the dark side of Hürrem's ambition. While her actions helped secure her son's future, they also left a permanent mark on the Ottoman family, sowing the seeds of future instability and tension within the dynasty. Selim II's path to the throne. With Mustafa out of the way, Selim II emerged as the heir apparent to the throne. However, his path to the throne was not as easy as it might have seemed. Selim was not the strong military leader that his father Süleyman had been, and he lacked the same level of charisma and popular support that Mustafa had enjoyed. Selim II, who had earned the nickname Selim the Drunkard due to his fondness for indulgence and luxury, seemed an unlikely candidate to rule the Ottoman Empire. Yet, Hürrem Sultan, whose political acumen had already been proven, continued to wield immense influence over Süleyman. She carefully managed the political environment within the palace and the court, ensuring that Selim would not be undermined by rivals. The fact that Selim II was able to ascend to the throne is a testament to Hürrem Sultan's remarkable political skill and her relentless dedication to securing her son's place in history. Once Selim II became sultan, his reign was marked by a shift in focus for the empire. While Süleyman had been a military conqueror, expanding the empire's borders significantly, Selim II did not share his father's zeal for military campaigns. Instead, Selim II is often remembered for his indulgence in pleasures and his lack of interest in ruling with the same diligence as his father, despite his less impressive leadership qualities. Selim II continued his mother's legacy by maintaining the empire's stability, although he lacked the military genius and strong governance of Süleyman. Hürrem's lasting legacy in the court and empire. Hürrem Sultan's legacy went far beyond the political maneuvering she orchestrated for her children. Her role in the Ottoman court fundamentally changed the way that women were perceived in terms of political power. Before her, the women of the harem had little to no influence over political decisions, but Hürrem Sultan's influence was undeniable. She proved that a woman, even one born a slave, could rise to the heights of power and shape the course of a great empire. Her legacy was also marked by her profound impact on Ottoman culture. Hürrem was a patron of the arts, funding the construction of architectural masterpieces such as the Haseki Sultan Mosque and supporting a flourishing of Ottoman architecture, literature, and education. Her charitable works also left a lasting mark as she funded numerous social institutions such as hospitals, schools, and orphanages, many of which still stand as monuments to her generosity. Even after her death in 1558, Hürrem Sultan's influence continued to be felt in the Ottoman Empire. Her son, Selim II, ruled for a decade, though the empire began to slowly decline after Süleyman's death, largely due to the lack of strong leadership. However, Hürrem's actions set the stage for future generations of women in the Ottoman court to wield more influence, and her legacy as a political and cultural force in the empire endures to this day. The impact of Hürrem Sultan's ambition. The Ottoman Empire, under Süleyman the Magnificent, reached the height of its power. Yet, it was Hürrem Sultan's ambition that ensured the dynasty would continue through her son, Selim II, despite the tumult and tragedy surrounding the royal succession. Her actions, while controversial, allowed for the preservation of the Ottoman dynasty and set a precedent for women in the empire to hold political influence. Through sheer determination, intelligence, and political maneuvering, Hürrem Sultan secured her legacy as one of the most powerful and influential women in Ottoman history. As the wife of Süleyman the Magnificent, Hürrem Sultan was more than just a political figure or the mother of the future sultan. She became a symbol of philanthropy, religious devotion, and cultural patronage within the Ottoman Empire. While her actions in securing the throne for her son, Selim II, and influencing political affairs were significant, her legacy was also deeply rooted in the positive social and cultural changes she facilitated. Hürrem Sultan's charitable work left an indelible mark on the empire, benefiting the poor, the sick, and the marginalized. Through her efforts, she established a model of philanthropy that would endure long after her death. Philanthropy as a cornerstone of her reign. One of Hürrem Sultan's greatest achievements was her commitment to social welfare and charitable works. While many of her contemporaries in the Ottoman court were concerned with consolidating power or advancing personal interests, Hürrem directed her energies toward improving the lives of those less fortunate. Her philanthropic contributions were not limited to the palace or the elite, they reached the heart of Ottoman society, particularly the poor and the disenfranchised. Hürrem Sultan's charitable efforts were vast and multifaceted. She funded the construction of numerous mosques, schools, and hospitals, as well as orphanages and public baths. These institutions were crucial to the functioning of Ottoman society, serving as centers of learning, healthcare, and social support for those in need. Her investment in these public services was not just about securing her own legacy but also about providing tangible benefits to her people, many of whom had no other means of support. Perhaps one of the most famous examples of Hürrem Sultan's charitable work is the construction of the Haseki Sultan Mosque in Istanbul. This mosque, which still stands today, was not only an architectural masterpiece but also a symbol of Hürrem Sultan's dedication to her faith and her commitment to the well-being of her subjects. The mosque was part of a larger complex that included a hospital, a school, and a public kitchen, providing a place for spiritual solace, education, and healthcare. In addition to the mosque, Hürrem Sultan also funded a madris, religious school, Kulai charitable complex, and various Waqf charitable endowment projects, which allowed her to leave behind a lasting legacy of charitable giving. Her generosity ensured that many of the poor and marginalized within the empire would have access to essential services such as food, shelter, and education. This model of philanthropy became a hallmark of her reign and was often cited by future sultans and wealthy Ottoman elites as an example to follow. Hürrem's influence on the arts and culture. Hürrem Sultan was not just a patron of charitable works, she was also a significant patron of the arts. As Süleyman's beloved wife, she used her influence to commission works of art, literature, and architecture that enriched Ottoman culture. Her patronage was instrumental in the flourishing of the Ottoman Renaissance, a period of cultural and artistic rebirth in the 16th century, under Süleyman's reign. One of the most notable examples of Hürrem Sultan's influence in the arts is the architectural legacy she helped foster. The Ottoman Empire during Süleyman's reign saw some of its most magnificent structures built, many of which were commissioned by Hürrem herself. The Haseki Sultan Mosque is just one example of her dedication to beautifying and enriching the cultural landscape of Istanbul. Through her support, Hürrem not only ensured the creation of stunning architectural works, but also helped to build a lasting cultural heritage for the empire. Beyond architecture, Hürrem Sultan also supported the arts in other ways. She was a patron of literature, especially works of poetry and history. During the Ottoman Renaissance, literature flourished under Süleyman's patronage, and Hürrem played a key role in fostering this intellectual and cultural growth. She was particularly fond of Ottoman poets and writers, many of whom composed works in her honor, praising her beauty, wisdom, and generosity. Hürrem Sultan's name was immortalized in these literary works, and her contributions to the world of literature further solidified her legacy as a woman of great intellectual and cultural influence. Religious devotion and her role in the Islamic world. Alongside her political and cultural contributions, Hürrem Sultan was deeply devoted to her faith. Her religious devotion was evident in her charitable endeavors, many of which were directed toward the support of religious institutions and the welfare of the Muslim community. As the Sultan's wife, she worked to strengthen the religious fabric of the Ottoman Empire, and she became a key figure in the promotion of Islamic values and institutions. In particular, Hürrem Sultan was instrumental in the construction of religious buildings, including mosques and Islamic schools. These institutions played a crucial role in the spiritual and social life of the Ottoman Empire. By supporting the creation of mosques and religious schools, Hürrem ensured that her influence would be felt not only in the material world but also in the spiritual realm. She was regarded as a powerful patron of Islamic culture, and her charitable work was often seen as an expression of her deep religious piety. Moreover, Hürrem Sultan's charitable acts also extended to the broader Islamic world. She used her wealth and influence to support the pilgrims traveling to Mecca and Medina, the two holiest cities in Islam. Her support for these religious travelers ensured that they had access to food, shelter, and other necessities during their journey. This act of charity was highly regarded, not only in the Ottoman Empire but also in the wider Muslim world, further cementing her reputation as a devout and generous figure. A legacy of philanthropy and social responsibility. The charitable work of Hürrem Sultan was not only important during her lifetime but also laid the foundation for future generations of Ottoman rulers and elites to follow. Her focus on philanthropy, education, and healthcare became central tenets of Ottoman governance and helped to create a more just and equitable society. Through her efforts, she demonstrated that political power and wealth could be used for the benefit of the people, particularly the poor and vulnerable. Her legacy of charitable giving continued long after her death in 1558. Hürrem Sultan was one of the first women in the Ottoman Empire to wield such influence, and her philanthropic efforts set a precedent for future sultanas and women of the harem. Her life and work demonstrated that women, even within the confines of the harem, could have a profound impact on the social and cultural development of the empire. Hürrem Sultan remains an enduring symbol of compassion, religious devotion, and cultural enrichment in the history of the Ottoman Empire. Through her charitable endeavors, her support for the arts, and her commitment to Islamic values, she left behind a legacy that was not just about political power but about making a tangible difference in the lives of the people she ruled over. Her contributions to the Ottoman Empire have continued to be celebrated and remembered, not only as the Sultan's wife but as a powerful force for good in an empire that spanned continents and centuries. Hürrem Sultan's name endures, immortalized not just in history but in the hearts and minds of those who benefited from her generosity and her vision. By the time Hürrem Sultan had firmly established herself as the Sultan's legal wife and the mother of the future heir to the throne, her influence over Süleyman the Magnificent and the Ottoman Empire was undeniable. She was not merely a political partner to the Sultan, she had become the power behind the throne, shaping key decisions and molding the future of the empire with her keen intellect and strategic mind. Though Süleyman was known for his military prowess, administrative reforms, and cultural patronage, it was Hürrem who had the most significant influence over the affairs of the court and the inner workings of the Ottoman state. As the Sultan's most trusted confidant and advisor, she wielded her power subtly but effectively. She was a force to be reckoned with, balancing love, politics, and diplomacy with remarkable skill, strategic alliances, and political maneuvering. As Süleyman's reign continued to expand the Ottoman Empire, Hürrem Sultan's role within the palace deepened, forging alliances with influential figures in the empire. This ability to form critical alliances was one of her greatest strengths and was central to her success in maintaining power. One of Hürrem's most important contributions to Süleyman's reign was her ability to manage the relationships with key figures at court. She worked tirelessly to ensure that those loyal to her and her son Selim II were strategically placed in positions of power. This meant maintaining the loyalty of the Ottoman army, military leaders, bureaucrats, and the administration. Through careful diplomacy and negotiations, Hürrem made sure that her supporters were well rewarded, while potential rivals were sidelined or neutralized. The role of women in the Ottoman court. A new era. One of Hürrem Sultan's most enduring legacies was the change she brought to the role of women in the Ottoman Empire. Before her rise to power, women in the harem were generally seen as passive figures, their primary role being to provide heirs to the Sultan and entertain him. However, Hürrem redefined the position of women within the palace, turning the harem into a place of significant political influence. Hürrem Sultan's power was rooted not just in her personal relationship with Süleyman, but in her ability to maneuver within the political system. She proved that women could hold positions of authority and have a voice in the governance of the empire. Her influence was seen in the way she managed the court and in her ability to shape decisions that affected the empire's foreign policy, military campaigns, and domestic governance. Hürrem's rise to power made it clear that the Ottoman court was no longer a space entirely controlled by men, it was a space where women could wield political influence as well. While Süleyman's other wives and concubines remained largely in the background, Hürrem stood out as the most powerful woman in the empire, not just because of her status as the Sultan's favorite consort but because of her active role in shaping the future of the Ottoman state. The Ottoman court, which had once been a place of intrigue and subtle influence, had now become the arena for the Sultan's wife to assert herself as a key political player. Hürrem Sultan's relationship with foreign diplomats. Another critical aspect of Hürrem Sultan's influence was her role in Ottoman diplomacy. As the Sultan's wife, she was deeply involved in maintaining and cultivating the empire's relationships with powerful European states, particularly with the Venetian Republic, France, and the Holy Roman Empire. Through her diplomatic correspondence and personal negotiations, Hürrem Sultan helped secure valuable alliances for the Ottoman Empire, especially as the empire continued its military and territorial expansion. Her interactions with foreign diplomats were crucial in ensuring that the Ottoman Empire remained a dominant force on the world stage. The personal correspondence between Hürrem and European diplomats shows the extent of her diplomatic efforts. In many ways, Hürrem became an unofficial ambassador for the Ottoman Empire, wielding influence over European courts and ensuring that the empire's interests were always protected. She also worked to maintain Ottoman relations with neighboring Persia and the Mamluks. Hürrem Sultan's diplomacy was instrumental in stabilizing these relationships and maintaining a delicate balance of power between the empires. While Süleyman led military campaigns, it was Hürrem who ensured that the political alliances and treaties that enabled Ottoman successes were kept intact. Internal politics, rivalries and manipulations. Though Hürrem Sultan was deeply loved by Süleyman, her rise to power within the court was not without challenges. Rivalries within the harem were inevitable, and Hürrem had to navigate a complex web of relationships with other wives and concubines who were equally vying for influence. Her greatest political rival came from within her own family. Mahidevran Sultan, the mother of Mustafa, the Sultan's eldest son. Mustafa was widely seen as the most capable and charismatic of Süleyman's sons, and he enjoyed considerable military and political support. In many ways, Mustafa was the heir apparent, at least in the eyes of many within the Ottoman military and elite circles. His popularity posed a direct threat to Selim II, Hürrem's son. The rivalry between Hürrem and Mahidevran was fierce. In her efforts to secure the throne for her own son, Hürrem worked behind the scenes to undermine Mustafa's position. The rivalry between the two women reached its tragic conclusion with the execution of Mustafa in 1553. A decision that Süleyman carried out after being convinced that Mustafa had been plotting to overthrow him. While Hürrem's exact role in Mustafa's downfall remains a topic of historical debate, her involvement is widely acknowledged. The execution of Mustafa marked the final step in securing the throne for Selim II and cemented Hürrem Sultan's power within the court. The death of Mustafa left a void in the royal family, but it also made clear the extent of Hürrem Sultan's influence. While Süleyman may have been the face of the empire, it was Hürrem who, behind the scenes, held the reins of power, ensuring that her family's future was secured. Legacy of power. The rise of the Valide Sultan. Hürrem Sultan's legacy was not only about securing the throne for Selim II but also about changing the future role of women in the Ottoman Empire. As the mother of the Sultan, Hürrem established the model of the Valide Sultan, the Sultan's mother, who would hold significant influence in the administration of the empire. After Selim II ascended the throne, Hürrem became the first Valide Sultan, a position of considerable power that was cemented for future sultanas. In the years following her death in 1558, Hürrem Sultan's legacy endured. Her influence continued through her children, particularly Selim II, whose reign, though marked by indulgence, carried forward the changes Hürrem had instigated. The Ottoman harem was forever altered by her, with future consorts taking a more active role in court politics. Her role as the Sultan's most trusted advisor, her strategic thinking, and her ability to manipulate the political landscape of the Ottoman Empire would become a model for future Ottoman sultanas. The Valide Sultan would no longer be just a symbolic position but one of significant political power. As Hürrem Sultan aged, she witnessed the changing tides of the Ottoman Empire and her own personal legacy becoming firmly cemented in the annals of history. Her role as a political power, cultural patron, and social reformer had transformed not just the inner workings of the Ottoman court but also the very fabric of the empire itself. As the beloved wife of Süleyman the Magnificent and the mother of Selim II, Hürrem Sultan had long secured her place as one of the most powerful women in history, leaving behind a complex and lasting legacy that would continue to shape the empire for years to come. The decline of her power. By the late 1550s, Süleyman and Hürrem Sultan had enjoyed a long and prosperous partnership, but the aging sultan began to face the inevitable realities of time. Süleyman, once the energetic and ambitious conqueror who had expanded the empire to its greatest territorial extent, was now older and weakened by the physical toll of his numerous military campaigns. Hürrem, though still active in courtly affairs, was also facing her own health challenges. The once vibrant woman who had shaped the empire's policies and diplomatic affairs was now in the twilight of her life. Despite her declining health, Hürrem remained a central figure in the court until the end. She continued to hold significant sway over Süleyman, who relied on her counsel and trusted her judgment in the increasingly turbulent political landscape. However, as with all powerful figures, time brought about changes. The Ottoman Empire, which had flourished under Süleyman's rule, was beginning to experience signs of internal instability, exacerbated by the growing factionalism within the royal family. The role of the Valide Sultan. The title of Valide Sultan, the mother of the Sultan, would soon become central to the power dynamics within the Ottoman court, and Hürrem Sultan played an integral role in establishing it. After Selim II ascended the throne, Hürrem became the Valide Sultan, a role that would be held by the Sultan's mother for centuries thereafter. This position allowed Hürrem to maintain her influence even after Süleyman's death in 1566. However, Hürrem's tenure as Valide Sultan was short-lived. She died in 1558, 8 years before Süleyman's passing. Despite her relatively early death, Hürrem Sultan's legacy continued to resonate in the Ottoman Empire through her children and the institutions she established during her lifetime. The Valide Sultan, once a largely ceremonial position, had been transformed into a powerful political force during Hürrem's time, and her actions ensured that future mothers of sultans would wield substantial influence. The loss of Süleyman. A turning point. When Süleyman the Magnificent passed away in 1566, the loss was not just felt by the Ottoman Empire, but personally by Hürrem Sultan, who had spent decades as his confidant, advisor, and beloved wife. Although they had spent years together and built a shared vision for the empire, Hürrem died 8 years before Süleyman, leaving behind a legacy that would become the foundation for Selim II's rule. Süleyman's death marked a shift in the empire's fortunes. Selim II, who ascended to the throne after Süleyman, did not share his father's military ambitions or his political acumen. His reign would become a turning point for the Ottoman Empire, which would begin to experience internal challenges and external pressures. Though Selim II was a less effective ruler than Süleyman, the empire nonetheless maintained its position as a major power in the world, but it would not reach the heights of prosperity it had enjoyed under Süleyman's reign. For Hürrem Sultan, her death in 1558 meant that she would not witness the empire's slow decline after Süleyman's passing. Yet she left behind a system that had elevated the role of women in the empire, particularly in the court and politics. Her influence would continue to be felt, particularly through her son, Selim II, who, despite his indulgent nature, continued some of the policies and projects set forth by his mother and father. Her children and their impact. Hürrem Sultan's greatest achievement was not just her role in securing the throne for Selim II, but the legacy she left through her children. Her children were among the most important figures in the empire, and her influence as a mother played a central role in their careers. Beyond Selim II, Hürrem Sultan had several other children, including Mustafa Sultan, one of the most influential women of her time, who played a key role in politics and culture within the empire. Mustafa Sultan, Hürrem's daughter, was a prominent figure in the Ottoman court and maintained her mother's legacy by becoming a powerful voice for the women of the empire. As a well-respected princess, she helped secure political alliances and supported charitable causes throughout the empire. Through Mustafa Sultan, Hürrem's legacy continued, influencing the politics and culture of the empire long after her death. The family legacy was also carried on by Selim II, whose reign, though not as historically significant as his father's, continued the policies and religious institutions established by Süleyman and Hürrem. Selim II's era marked the continuation of Hürrem's vision of patronage and cultural development, even as the empire began to experience growing internal strife. Hürrem Sultan's enduring legacy. Hürrem Sultan left behind a remarkable legacy that would influence the Ottoman Empire long after her death. Through her strategic political maneuvers, her philanthropic efforts, and her role as the mother of a sultan, Hürrem fundamentally reshaped the role of women in the Ottoman court. She was a visionary who saw the potential for women to wield power and influence in a world dominated by men. Her legacy was not only one of political influence but also of cultural enrichment. Through her patronage of the arts, her support of religious institutions, and her significant contributions to charitable works, Hürrem Sultan became one of the most important and influential figures in Ottoman history. Her name would be remembered not just as the beloved wife of Süleyman the Magnificent, but as a woman who changed the course of the empire, shaped its future, and left an enduring mark on its cultural and political landscape. The death of Hürrem Sultan in 1558 marked a significant turning point, not only in the Ottoman Empire but also in the life of Süleyman the Magnificent. Their decades-long partnership had been the foundation of both Süleyman's personal life and the empire's political and cultural achievements. Hürrem Sultan was not just the Sultan's wife. She was his confidant, advisor, and equal in many aspects of governance. With her passing, Süleyman was left to face a world without his most trusted partner. And the Ottoman Empire began to slowly shift as a result. Süleyman's grief and emotional decline. Though Süleyman had led a remarkable reign, Hürrem's death was an emotional blow that affected him deeply. For many years, she had been his rock, his sounding board in decisions of state, and his most trusted advisor. Süleyman had come to rely on Hürrem not only for guidance on political matters but also for emotional support, especially during difficult times. Her death left an emotional void that no one could fill. In the years following her passing, Süleyman was known to have become more withdrawn, focusing more on the empire's military campaigns and less on courtly matters. Although he continued his military conquests, most notably his campaigns in Hungary and the siege of Malta, his personal life seemed to suffer. He would never fully recover from the loss of Hürrem, and many historians argue that this emotional decline began to affect his decision-making. Even if Süleyman remained a powerful and respected sultan, it is often noted that after Hürrem's death, Süleyman's judgment seemed to grow less sharp, and his ability to navigate the increasingly complex internal politics of the empire began to falter. He had trusted Hürrem to manage much of the court's affairs, and now, without her, the delicate balance of power within the palace and the court became harder to maintain. The presence of powerful rivals and growing discontent among different factions within the empire would come to challenge the stability of the Ottoman rule. The empire without Hürrem. Challenges and tensions. With Hürrem Sultan gone, the Ottoman Empire began to show signs of the strain that had been hidden during Süleyman's earlier years of governance. The Ottoman court had long been a place of intrigue and competition, and with Süleyman becoming less involved in day-to-day matters, those within the empire's hierarchy began to position themselves to gain favor with the Sultan. Hürrem had been a key political force behind the throne, keeping rival factions in check and ensuring the stability of Süleyman's rule. Selim II, her son and the new heir to the throne, was still relatively young and inexperienced. Though Süleyman had planned for Selim to succeed him, there was little to suggest that Selim II would be able to lead with the same skill and determination that his father had demonstrated. The absence of Hürrem Sultan left a significant gap in leadership. While Süleyman continued to rule for a few more years, his decisions became more cautious, and he was no longer as proactive in shaping the empire's direction. This period marked a gradual decline in Ottoman political cohesion, and the empire began to face challenges both at home and abroad. Internal dissent grew as the Sultan's diminishing focus on governance allowed rival factions to gain power. Süleyman's military leaders and court officials, many of whom had once respected Hürrem for her ability to navigate palace politics, began to take advantage of the power vacuum. Süleyman's weakening influence over internal political dynamics opened the door for Selim II to eventually claim the throne. But without the guidance and political cohesion that Hürrem had provided. Selim II, the aftermath of Hürrem's death. Selim II, upon assuming the throne after Süleyman's death in 1566, inherited an empire that was beginning to lose its previous luster. Although he did not share his father's military zeal or his political acumen, Selim II still maintained the empire's external strength, largely thanks to the administrative structures put in place during Süleyman's reign. However, Selim II was known for his indulgence and disinterest in the day-to-day governance of the empire. His reign is often marked by his excessive lifestyle, earning him the nickname Selim the Drunkard. He spent much of his time in leisure rather than addressing the empire's mounting internal and external challenges. Without Hürrem Sultan's strategic mind and political insight, Selim II was largely ineffective in dealing with the growing tensions within the empire. His focus on luxury and excess rather than military or political affairs marked a sharp departure from the policies of his father and mother. While Selim II was able to maintain the empire's territorial integrity during his reign, the internal disarray that began during his father's later years continued under his leadership. The political fragmentation that had been suppressed during Suleiman's reign now came to the forefront. The Ottoman military and the Janissary Corps, which had once been incredibly loyal to Suleiman, began to fragment and show signs of internal conflict. This internal fragmentation, combined with growing external threats, set the stage for what would later become the slow but inevitable decline of the Ottoman Empire. Despite these challenges, Selim II continued many of the cultural and architectural projects championed by Suleiman and Hürrem Sultan. The Ottoman Renaissance, which had reached its peak under Suleiman, continued in a more subdued form, and the arts and architecture still flourished under Selim II. However, the lack of strong leadership and vision would contribute to the empire's eventual stagnation. Suleiman's legacy without Hürrem Suleyman the Magnificent's reign, though marked by great military conquests, cultural achievements, and legal reforms, ultimately lacked the same drive and coherence after Hürrem Sultan's death. The empire's strength began to wane as internal conflicts and external threats slowly took hold. While Suleiman's reign is often remembered as the zenith of Ottoman power, it is clear that much of that power was sustained by the partnership between Suleiman and Hürrem. Hürrem's political foresight, her ability to unite factions, and her deep understanding of diplomacy had been key to the empire's success. Without her, Suleiman lost not only a beloved companion but also a strategic advisor, which left the empire vulnerable to the fractures that would soon begin to appear. The absence of Hürrem Sultan also led to a shift in the role of women within the Ottoman court. While Hürrem had paved the way for women to exert political influence in the empire, her death marked the end of an era. Future Valide sultans would continue to exert influence, but none would reach the same level of power or prominence that Hürrem had during her lifetime. Reflection on Hürrem's influence. As Suleiman's reign came to an end, the empire began to reflect on Hürrem Sultan's legacy. Historians and contemporaries alike recognized the unique and profound influence that Hürrem had on both Suleiman and the Ottoman Empire. She had been more than just a wife and mother. She had been a powerful political figure in her own right, shaping the course of history through her political maneuvers, cultural patronage, and social reforms. Though Suleiman's later years were marked by personal loss and the empire's slow decline, Hürrem Sultan's legacy endured through the Ottoman court, her children, and the cultural institutions she supported. The women who came after her in the court were more likely to wield power, and future consorts, whether they held the title of Hasiki Sultan or Valide Sultan, were aware of the precedent Hürrem had set. Hürrem Sultan was a remarkable woman who defied the constraints of her time. Through her strategic mind, diplomatic prowess, and unwavering love for her family, she changed the course of Ottoman history and left a legacy that would shape the empire long after her death. The ascension of Selim II to the throne after Süleyman the Magnificent's death marked a distinct turning point in the Ottoman Empire. The legacy of Hürrem Sultan, whose profound influence on both the political and cultural landscape of the empire had been immense, would now be carried forward by her son. However, the empire's transition into Selim II's rule was marked by both continuity and change, with Selim II's personal indulgences and lack of governance experience presenting new challenges for the Ottoman Empire. While Süleyman the Magnificent had led the empire to the height of its power, Selim II, who earned the moniker Selim the Drunkard, did not share his father's zeal for military conquest or his deeply rooted political focus. Despite this, Selim II was tasked with leading a vast and powerful empire that still held sway over much of the Mediterranean, the Middle East, and North Africa. Hürrem Sultan, through her influence, had shaped the future of the Ottoman dynasty and positioned Selim II as the heir apparent. Though Selim II was not the strong leader his father had been, Hürrem had ensured that the Ottoman court would continue to be influenced by the legacy of her strategic mind. But the reality of her son's reign, marked by his personal excesses and lack of initiative, began to reveal the vulnerabilities within the empire that had been masked during Suleiman's era. Selim II, the Sultan's reign of indulgence. Selim II's reign, which began in 1566 following Suleiman's death, quickly became one of excess and indulgence. While the empire maintained its territorial integrity, Selim II proved to be a sultan with little interest in the duties that came with ruling a sprawling empire. His addiction to the pleasures of life, particularly his fondness for wine and luxury, earned him the title of Selim the Drunkard. Unlike his father, who had been deeply engaged in the governance of the empire, Selim II left much of the administration to others. This shift in leadership did not go unnoticed. Selim II's lack of interest in military affairs and governance created a power vacuum at the top, and court officials, military leaders, and family members began to exert more influence over the empire's direction. Though Selim II continued to enjoy the privileges of being the sultan, the reality of his reign was one of growing discontent and a slow decline in the empire's internal coherence. While Selim II did continue some of the policies and projects begun by his father, his reign marked the beginning of a more indulgent, less effective period for the Ottoman Empire. The empire's once great military strength began to suffer, as Selim II showed little interest in maintaining the military prowess that had been central to Süleyman's reign. This left the empire vulnerable to external threats and internal corruption. The continuing influence of Hürrem Sultan. Despite the challenges Selim II faced as sultan, the influence of his mother, Hürrem Sultan, continued to be felt in the Ottoman court and in the empire's overall governance. Hürrem, through her diplomacy, political acumen, and cultural patronage, had paved the way for a more active role for women in the Ottoman court. Though Selim II did not share his mother's interest in governance, Hürrem's legacy was still evident in the ways in which the empire operated. The Ottoman court continued to be a place where women could wield significant influence, especially through the position of the Valide Sultan, the sultan's mother. Hürrem Sultan had transformed this role, turning it from a ceremonial title into a powerful political office. As Selim II became sultan, Hürrem's model for royal women to have a say in court affairs continued through the women in his life, especially through his mother, Nurbana Sultan, who took on the role of Valide Sultan after his ascension to the throne. While Selim II did not have the same political inclinations as his father or mother, the foundations they had set in motion continued to shape the course of the empire. Hürrem Sultan had ensured that Selim II's path to the throne was clear, and even though he lacked the capabilities of his father, Hürrem's legacy persisted through her influence over his reign, however indirectly. The decline of the Ottoman Empire under Selim II. The initial years of Selim II's reign did not bode well for the Ottoman Empire. While the empire still maintained its vast territories, internal strife began to surface. Selim II's indulgence in luxury, his failure to engage in state matters, and his lack of military acumen created instability. The Ottoman military, which had been a cornerstone of the empire's success, began to lose its cohesion. The Janissary Corps, once the elite military force of the empire, began to show signs of discontent, undermining the once mighty Ottoman military. As Selim II focused on his pleasures, the Ottoman Empire began to lose ground to its rivals. Although the empire maintained control over its vast territories, the slow erosion of power at the top, coupled with the lack of leadership, meant that Selim II could not sustain the level of expansion and political control that Süleyman had established. The beginning of the decline of the empire during Selim II's reign can be traced to these years of internal mismanagement. Externally, the empire was facing growing pressure from European powers. The Habsburgs, Russia, and other European nations were increasingly challenging Ottoman influence in the Mediterranean, the Balkans, and the Middle East. Though Süleyman's reign had marked a high point in Ottoman expansion, Selim II's leadership lacked the vision and energy to maintain the empire's dominance. Cultural and religious continuity amidst decline. While Selim II's reign was marked by political and military struggles, Hürrem Sultan's legacy in cultural and religious patronage continued to have a lasting impact. Her role in fostering the arts and supporting religious institutions remained a cornerstone of the empire's cultural identity. The Ottoman Renaissance, which had flourished during Süleyman's rule, continued in a more subdued form under Selim II. Art, literature, and architecture still flourished, but the once strong political and military drive was now faltering. Hürrem Sultan had established a model of patronage that was carried on by the future Valide sultans. Selim may not have been a strong leader politically, but his court continued to support the artistic and religious endeavors that Hürrem had championed. Religious buildings, schools, and cultural projects continued to be funded. though with less political purpose and more focus on maintaining traditional Ottoman culture. The enduring influence of Hürrem Sultan's legacy. Despite Selim II's indulgence, Hürrem Sultan's legacy as a political and cultural force remained powerful. Hürrem had set a precedent for women in the court, and her influence continued even in the face of Selim II's lack of leadership. Her charitable works, cultural patronage, and diplomatic efforts paved the way for future women in the empire to wield power, ensuring that the Valide Sultan's role remained significant in the empire's political landscape. Hürrem Sultan may have passed, but her vision for women in power and her legacy of patronage endured throughout the reign of her son. The story of Hürrem Sultan, once known as Roxolana, is not merely one of a woman who rose from humble origins to become one of the most powerful and influential figures in the Ottoman Empire. It is a story of ambition, love, and the strategic use of power, a story that forever changed the political, cultural, and social fabric of the empire. Through her influence on Süleyman the Magnificent, her role in the Ottoman court, and her legacy through her children, Hürrem Sultan is remembered as a pivotal figure in world history, a woman who redefined the role of women in power. At a time when women's roles were largely confined to the harem, Hürrem Sultan shattered the norms and set a precedent for women in political and public life. Her rise from a captured slave girl to the Sultan's most trusted consort, and eventually to Valide Sultan, was unprecedented in the history of the Ottoman Empire. She used her beauty, intelligence, and charm to rise through the ranks of the harem and eventually become a key advisor to Süleyman, her influence extending far beyond the walls of the palace. Under her guidance, the Ottoman Empire saw a redefined role for women within the palace, and Hürrem Sultan's strategic vision and shrewd political maneuvers led to the Valide Sultan becoming one of the most influential political figures in the empire. She not only guided her husband, Süleyman, but she also secured the throne for her son, Selim II, and laid the foundation for future generations of powerful women in the Ottoman court. Her success was a rare and groundbreaking achievement, making her one of the most extraordinary women of the 16th century. Hürrem Sultan's political influence and cultural contributions. Beyond her personal relationship with Süleyman, Hürrem Sultan had an indelible impact on the political and cultural landscape of the Ottoman Empire. She was not simply a figure of luxury and indulgence. She was a strategic mastermind who understood the intricacies of diplomacy, power struggles, and governance. She played a crucial role in shaping Ottoman foreign policy, especially in maintaining the empire's relations with European powers such as the Venetian Republic and France. Her political vision also extended to the internal governance of the empire. She was instrumental in securing Selim II's succession to the throne, which was a complex and often dangerous process. In the court, she handled delicate matters with grace and cunning, ensuring that Selim II would be positioned as the heir, despite the formidable challenges posed by other potential heirs, particularly Mustafa. Culturally, Hürrem Sultan's patronage of the arts, religious institutions, and charitable works was far-reaching. She commissioned the construction of the Haseki Sultan Mosque in Istanbul, which remains a symbol of her influence. Through her support of the arts and her funding of charitable works, Hürrem Sultan helped establish a legacy of cultural enrichment and social responsibility. Her patronage of Ottoman architecture, literature, and education paved the way for future cultural advancements in the empire. The complex legacy of Hürrem Sultan. However, Hürrem Sultan's legacy is not without its complexities. Her role in the death of Mustafa, her husband Süleyman's eldest son, remains one of the most controversial aspects of her legacy. While it is widely believed that Hürrem played a key role in orchestrating the execution of Mustafa to secure the throne for Selim II, her supporters argue that her actions were driven by a mother's desire to protect her son's future and the stability of the empire. Regardless of her motivations, the death of Mustafa marked a turning point in the history of the Ottoman dynasty and created deep divisions within the royal family. Moreover, Hürrem Sultan's influence over Süleyman, particularly as he grew older, has been a subject of historical debate. Some critics argue that Hürrem exercised too much power over the Sultan, while others view her as a guiding force who helped stabilize and strengthen the empire during a critical period in its history. The true extent of her influence will likely remain a matter of speculation, But what is clear is that her role in the empire was undeniable and powerful. The enduring influence of Hürrem Sultan. In the years following Hürrem Sultan's death, the empire slowly began to decline, largely due to the lack of strong leadership following Süleyman's passing. Selim II, though a symbol of her legacy, was not the effective ruler that his father had been. Süleyman's death marked the end of an era, and the Ottoman Empire began to lose the cohesiveness and strength it had under Süleyman's rule. Yet, even as the Ottoman Empire entered a period of decline, Hürrem Sultan's influence remained felt. The role of women in the Ottoman court was forever changed, with future Valide sultans and consorts wielding political influence in ways that were unimaginable before Hürrem's rise. Her legacy as a patron of the arts, a political advisor, and a cultural icon helped lay the groundwork for a future in which women would be able to shape the empire's destiny in subtle but profound ways. Hürrem Sultan was more than just the wife of a powerful sultan. She was a transformative figure in Ottoman history. Through her intelligence, political savvy, and vision, she became one of the most powerful women of her time and established a legacy that continues to resonate throughout history. Conclusion. The legacy of Hürrem Sultan. Hürrem Sultan was not just a character in the pages of history but a woman who reshaped the world around her. Her rise from a slave to the Sultan's most powerful consort and the Valide Sultan is a testament to her unparalleled ambition, political intellect, and ability to navigate the treacherous waters of court politics. Her legacy is multifaceted. She was a mother, a wife, an advisor, a diplomat, a philanthropist, and a patron of the arts. Through her, the Ottoman Empire flourished in ways that continue to be celebrated in both the realms of history and culture. The impact of Hürrem Sultan cannot be understated. She proved that a woman, even in the most restrictive of systems, could wield incredible power and influence. She created a legacy that would resonate not only in the Ottoman Empire but also throughout history, influencing the role of women in power for generations to come. Her story, marked by passion, politics, tragedy, and triumph, is a reminder of the profound impact one individual can have on shaping the course of history. Hürrem Sultan, the woman who redefined the role of women in an empire, will forever remain one of history's most remarkable figures.